Good morning and welcome to the School of Government and Public Policy Indonesia Alumni Talk Series. I'm Yulita Muspitasari, will be your moderator for today's webinar. I'm also a student at SGPP Class of 2021. Before we start, I would like to mention the guideline for today's webinar. First, please do not click share screen in any circumstances. To reduce the network usage and prevent unnecessary interruption, please leave the video and microphone off until you are given a chance to ask questions. As we'd love to hear from the audience, we will have the Q&A session right after the presentation from the speaker. And to ask the question during the Q&A session, you can select participant and the raise hand button will be visible at the bottom. Lastly, please be considerate to other participants. Okay, so discussing about public policy and School of Public Policy, School of Government and Public Policy Indonesia. Have you ever thought that right now there are many policies being come out from the government because due to the response for the coronavirus? And have you ever thought how they actually make the policy, how the policy making process happen? And have you ever wondered for the people in the parliament, how they learn about the public policy and how they make the policy brief, how they do the negotiation related to the policy making process? And today we are very lucky because we have the insight from a person who has learned about public policy and also work within the sector. So on today's SGPP Alumni Talk Series, we have Bapak Ali Andika Wardhana, SGPP alumni from class 2016. Welcome, Pak Ali. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before going for the sharing session, I would like to mention several things from your CV. So currently, Bapak Ali is assigned as the first secretary at the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Indonesia, the United Nations in New York. Prior to his assignment to the Permanent Mission in New York, Bapak Ali was a head of section at the Office of the Foreign Minister of Indonesia. His first assignment in Indonesia's mission abroad was in 2009 to the Indonesian Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. Bapak Ali Wardhana joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2005. And about his educational background, he gained his master's degree on public policy from SGPP in 2016 and his bachelor degree in international relations from the Institute of Social and Political Studies in 2004. So today, Pak Ali will share with us about his current job, the path that led him there, as well as the lesson learned along the way. So without further ado, the time is yours, Pak Ali.
Thank you, Lita. Thank you, SGPP, for having me and having the opportunity to say hi again to all my friends in my batch, as well as in other batches in SGPP, as well as other audience here during the Zoom webinar. I think this is very an opportune time for all of us to have a chat during the pandemic. And I think one of the blessings in disguise that we have now during the pandemic is we are now getting used to having this webinar series or other opportunities via the web through the video conferencing and etc. to engage with our colleagues, our friends, which usually we only do texting and other stuff. But back to the topic today. Once again, thank you for SGPP for having me today. And my experience was with SGPP was something that I think one of the best that I had, because first thing, one of the most important part of SGPP, or the experience that I had with SGPP that I need to point it out first, is that when I have the opportunity to join the class in 2015, and knowing that the program is going to be full in English and with the curriculum that based in various curricula from various education in abroad, not only Indonesia, I was like not really expecting too much of SGPP at first, to be honest. But when I enroll as SGPP and participate in the classes and to see all the resource persons, the lecturers, and how SGPP managed the education, it was something that really amazed me. You know, how they, even during my batch, we had this opportunity of having a field trip, a couple of groups of our classmates. We had this field trip to Bangkok, to the Philippines, and other places, which somehow really enlarge our perspective of how public policy works, of how we see the public policy in terms of our work, and how public policy determine how countries manage their economies, their population, their societies, and their countries in general. And with regards to my educational background as well as professional background, um, it's not very often back in, maybe when I was still in college back in 2000, since 1999 to 2014, 2004, never crossed my mind that I will be studying public policy in my master's degree, for my master's degree, because back then what we had in mind was either back to international relations, international law, or international economy, or all those areas or majors that really have something that correlates directly with the major of international relations. While back at that time, what I thought of public policy was something that, okay, this is the study of how you manage your country, how you manage the governance of the various sectors of the state, how you manage your fiscal policy, all those areas that's really nothing to do with foreign policy, diplomacy, all the stuff that relates directly with international relations. But apparently, when we try to really see through what foreign policy is, back when I first joined the foreign ministry, I understand exactly what it means to be able to have a grasp on public policy in your country where you are assigned to, or in your country in Indonesia. Why so? Because there's such a thing as that when you talk about foreign policy, something that you need to understand the intermastic nature of foreign policy. Intermastic in the saying that whatever you do in terms of policy you're making abroad, and foreign policy that you're making, it relates directly with the policies of, or what with the condition happen within your state, within your country. And whatever step that you're making, what the policy you're making abroad, it is being dictated by the policy of what you're really doing here back in your country, your government. And knowing exactly what the nature of your condition of the policy, internal or domestic policy, will determine how successfully you are in conducting foreign policy. Well, you're mentioning about the coronavirus in your introduction. I think maybe later on I can try to correlate the issue of coronavirus with how diplomacy is handling it, particularly in New York, and how we try to correlate also what we are doing, the focus of our foreign policy, with what the domestic condition is requiring us to do. That's something that intermastic foreign policy, or the relationship between public policy and foreign policy, has a very important elements in your study in SGPP. Maybe let's start from me, Yulita. we can go on with the discussion later on. Thank you.
Okay, sure, sure. Um, okay, so I would like to take back a little bit to the reflection about your time at SGPP. So, at first, how did you decide to continue your graduate education at SGPP? Where did you hear SGPP from, and how do you finally like, okay, I'm going to continue my master here?
Well, SGPP is located in Indonesia. So this is my personal experience. SGPP is Indonesia and it's in Sentul, whereas my house, my home at that time was in Depok. So for me, it's very convenient to have your master's school located just within minutes, maybe hour from your house, and it it just requires you to have maybe your motorcycle or your car to have you within those 30-40 minutes from home until you have arrived there in the school. But aside from that, I know for sure when because our batch was the second batch in SGPP, I learned about the school from my colleague in the ministry actually. So in the first batch, there's already one alumni from SGPP, Reza Adnan, and I learned about the school from him, and also from our foreign minister Hassan Wirayuda, because he was also one of the, I don't know, founding member or something of the school, and he explained about the school to the diplomats back in the foreign ministry. And from that on, I tried to gather more information about the school, and finally, with all those elements, I decided to, okay, this is my school, and thank God I got finally received at SGPP.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. So, after you after you joined SGPP and then you graduated, was there any a time that after your graduation you feel like, okay, I made the right decision to study at SGPP? That moment.
I think even before graduating, I already felt that this was the right decision I made. Why? So back to my basic notion at the beginning that the line of work that I'm doing, the nature of the work, which is intermastic in nature, dictates that diplomats need to really understand how policy making, how policy assessment, how policy evaluation, not only on foreign policy, but also more generally on the policy of your own state, of your own government, by having the best understanding of how to formulate, how to evaluate, how to assess those policies will enable you to better judge the policy options in terms of foreign policy that you should be making in the future. And that I receive, I got when we were still doing the classes in SGPP. I still remember we had that courses on uh, conflict prevention workshop. We have those course on macroeconomics. We have even course on international and global affairs, something that relates directly actually with my work. So I'm very happy. And at that time during classes, I know for sure I was making a good decision, a right decision.
Okay, we are glad to hear that. Now we are also would like to hear from the audience. If the audience want to ask question, please state your name and your institution. I will check on the, and you can also put a raise hand button. You can raise your hand if you would like to ask the question, or you can also put it in the chat if you want. And we also live streaming it now in YouTube. So if the YouTube audience want to ask question, you can also put it on the comment section on YouTube. Okay. So meanwhile, waiting for the questions from the audience, uh, would you like to share a bit about uh, your passion, about your career, or the other personal interests that uh, that you are pursuing now?
Mm, well, I think one of the experience, the good experience that we had when we enrolled in the class of public policy in SGPP, when you are blessed of meeting those friends or colleagues or those classmates of yours in the class, and with all those lecturers uh, providing you with amounts of knowledgeable people to guide you during the process of education at SGPP, you will come to realize that you will be in some way or another, you will be embarking on the discussion of how our policies back in Indonesia, in our own country, is doing. How is it far from ideal, or is it ideal enough from the perspective of the classes that we are attending, from the perspective of the courses that we are taking. With that, you in a matter of time, you will have that uh, uh, desire, I mean, to have better understanding and to have uh, uh, a guidance for you, not only in terms of your career, but to provide something for the betterment of the policies in your country. Say, for instance, when we are having this uh, uh, we had this field trip on, I was assigned to Bangkok to have a field trip on tuna processing and the export import policies of Thailand in terms of tuna. We realized that even the tuna of the Ayam brand, there's a tuna brand that's very famous in the world called Ayam brand. You can find it everywhere in the world, including here in the U.S. Even the base or the headquarters is one of the headquarters are also here in the U.S. Uh, the the basic commodity or the raw materials coming to for the processing in Bangkok in Thailand, some or most are also coming from Indonesia. Those are the raw materials that was sold from Indonesia by our fisheries, by the fishery sectors, and then it got into the processing centers in Bangkok, and it got value added, and it provided numerous economic opportunities for the people in Thailand, and thus enabling the economy to grow faster with that opportunity of the sector of tuna processing. And those things, when you see how we are still rudimentary in terms of making sure that all of our resources are really developed sufficiently, efficiently, then you will have that desire to provide something for our country to be better in terms of handling those kind of issues. That's for a simple example that we had during our program in SGPP.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. We have a question from the audience. Miss Luxi Nabila Fares, would you like to unmute yourself and ask directly? Let's. Okay, I think we can. Okay, she's not answering. Okay. Um, Speaking about your experience at SUP, and you mentioned earlier about the courses on negotiation, and then also several lecturer, like we have Pak Gita, we have Pak Agus Wijoyo. Um, when Indonesia was elected as non-permanent member of UN Security Council, you was there. And SGPP even posted in our Instagram. But we want to know more. What was your roles when Indonesia was elected as the non-permanent member on UN Security Council, and what are the ups and downs at that time?
I was lucky enough to be posted there in 2017. So I arrived in February 2017, and the election for the non-permanent seat of the Security Council was in 2018. So I had a full year, to experience firsthand how our diplomacy worked in terms of advancing our campaign to be elected as a non-permanent member. We were at the time campaigning against, we had a competitor from the Maldives. The Maldives is, if compared to Indonesia, of course, we have more population, more GDP, more and more from, if we compare to the Maldives. But the Maldives versus Indonesia at the time was something like David versus Goliath. David means David is the Maldives, where the Goliath is Indonesia, because Maldives campaign was uh, focused on the argument that as a small nation, small country, and a country which has never been elected as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, they have the right to be elected as the first time ever to be the non-permanent member of the Security Council. And as for Indonesia, this time around, this would be our fourth time, So we had a very challenging task to do. And the campaign was conducted not only in New York, but also in our missions around the globe, as well as in various meetings or conferences that we got the chance to participate. We even had, if compared to the elections back in Indonesia, the, say, a presidential election or the parliamentarian election campaigns, it has a similar nuance to it. We had seminars, we had programs, we had a lot of gatherings that we conducted to gather the support of 191 countries. And the selling point of Indonesia was that we as a very respectful nation in the world, the one of the largest Muslim population country in the world, which have a very strong economy. We had a very strong position in the UN in terms of the trust that we're making. We garnered support from majority of the nation, and finally in the election in 2018, we were elected. And the uh, the thing about Security Council is like an elite club of the United Nations. It only the members only 15 countries, but it dictates the policies or the way forward of the UN in terms of security, in terms of the international peace of the world. And for having our membership there, it provides us with the opportunity to really embark on a more stronger policy, diplomacy, and foreign policy that will enable us to gain more in terms of our international relations.
Okay, and from your personal experience, what was the most challenging when, except from the negotiation process, and then when Indonesia was become the non-permanent member of UN Security Council, what was the most challenging experience that you have ever encountered at that time?
Well, to be honest with you, and maybe this is something also that relates with what we receive during our classes. Um, we for me myself, I'm in charge of the issues relates to human rights, the issues relates to decolonization, the issues relates to terrorism at the time once, and uh, we had the opportunity to negotiate on fair resolutions of the United Nations, not only Security Council but also General Assembly. And uh, when we understand the how our uh, policy, our government's priorities in terms of those issues that we are handling, it will enable us. It enabled me to execute decisions or negotiating points that if you are not familiar with the issue or what the policies back in Indonesia, you will have difficulties with. And knowing the notion of that interlinkages between the policies back home with the international nature of negotiation in the UN, it enabled me and the diplomats, Indonesian diplomats, to better negotiate our positions in the UN. And why this is important? Because sometimes, well, I have we have with us Mr. Wisnu, Mr. Hastriansyah, and my colleagues back then in the batch knows exactly what it means with coordinating with Indonesian agencies, cross-ministerial coordination. So, and sometimes in the UN, you don't have that luxury of time. You don't have that luxury of time to coordinate. So you have to have that own judgment to see where your national priorities or interests lies, and to execute your positions and negotiating points based on that assessments that you have. And luckily in SGPP, you are taught of having that knowledge and way of thinking of knowing what best and how to navigate on that kind of situation.
Okay, yes, because in SGPP we have this critical thinking course, as well as for my batch now we also have the negotiation and conflict resolution course, which uh, for me myself it's very helpful if, to prepare if later on I want to work in public policy sectors. So we have the participants who raise hand, Miss Luxi Nabila Fares. So I will give the time for you to ask the question and you can unmute your microphone, please.
Hey, hello. Do you hear my voice?
Clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name is Luxina Fares, and I come from communication science from Muhammadiyah University of Surakarta, and I am a founder of a Women's Study Center at Solo. It's like a little community. I, as my background in communication science, I don't really know about international relations. So I actually want to ask about is there any obstacles for being a diplomat and how you face it? Because I don't know how to be a diplomat or uh, the how international relation impacted to be a being a diplomat, something like that. And the second question is about how the woman's role in in diplomacy. I mean, like, is there any uh, n- is there any specific role for women there for being a diplomat in the UN? Maybe that's all. Okay, hello,
Yes,
hello.
thank you, Lucy. Um, so will
Sorry.
so Pali, would you like to answer directly, please?
Okay. The first question was on challenges. Uh, I mean, the main challenge would be for me, from my own experience, I think the main challenge would be how you can really force yourself to equip and re-equip yourself with the elements that those that are imperative for diplomats to, in their daily work. What I mean is that it is imperative that every diplomat able to really develop themselves in a way that they can cope with the developing nature of your work, of the environment that you are working on. Take for example, in terms of issues, in terms of substance, in terms of the knowledge that you need to have, we as diplomats, we don't have the luxury of deciding on what particular issue that we want to be involved in or want to work on for the rest of our career. For example, when I first joined the foreign ministry after my education, I was assigned to a desk which the responsibility is on trade and investment in APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. So for international relations students, as like I am, and to most, maybe to some, maybe social sciences students, maths numbers are not really that how do you put it, not that really your friend per se. But the fact that I went, my first placement was on trade and investment, it dictates that I have to be able to really understand economy, and more specifically trade and investment. And uh, you have that challenge, which is constantly changing and evolving, and you need to always be able to keep up with equipping yourself with the necessity abilities, traits that you need to have to overcome those challenges. I think that's the most important part that you need to have as a diplomat. Thank you. Secondly, on women, I think there's no there are no specific duty or assignment that to be taken by women per se in the foreign ministry or in diplomacy. Uh, Women, men, they all can have their role, respective role. Even our foreign minister right now is a woman. Uh, and whatever you want to have to do, or whatever the issues that you really like to have, if you are really passionate enough, then you will have the same opportunity with everyone in the foreign ministry. It all depends on you. And for to give a perspective, back in my batch in the foreign ministry, we have around 50-50 percentage of between male and female. So it's a 50-50 chance for everybody. And I think the same goes with the batches or the classes of or the batch that comes after me. So after that, after my batch in performance, I think it's like 50, 55, 50, 50, 45, 55 percentage of men and women. So everyone have the same opportunity. It'll come to us again, how we want to do it. and how we want to excel in our job as diplomat.
Ms. Luxi, does that answer your question, or do you have any follow-up question on that?
Okay, maybe enough. Later, I will ask more. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
happy
Thank
to
you.
see and him.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question from the panelists. So from Ishvi, would you like to ask the question? You can unmute your microphone.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, hi, Mas Ali. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ma, clearly.
Can you hear? Okay. Okay. So ever since you talk about the human rights at the very beginning, so I would like to ask about SDGs. So you must be familiar with SDGs. Just like last year, I assisted migrant care to make the VNR for migrant workers, and this is especially for women, like female migrant workers, in a way to reach the decent work. So I would like to ask about SDGs in correlation with the migration itself. So can you explain the general? I mean, like explain in a general the effort of SDGs in addressing the migration issues. For example, like we know that migrant workers are often the biggest losers in terms or in ways of this economic crisis. So can you tell me about the what is it like the general effort that has been taken by the UN in a way or in correlation with the migration itself? So that's the number one. And then the second one is about the SDGs itself. So how will the COVID-19 impact to each goal of the SDGs, especially for SDGs number 8 about decent work, and also SDGs number 5 about gender equality. I think that's from me, about just two questions from me.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Ma Ishvi. So, Pak Ali, would you like to answer the question?
Wow, thank you very much. And thank you, Baisvi, for your valuable work with the SDG and VNR. And for those who are not familiar with VNR, VNR stands for Voluntary National Review of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, which are presented by countries on a yearly basis. For Indonesia, we conducted already two times. We had this VNR, voluntary national review of the implementation of our SDGs. And for everyone's information, the two VNRs that we conducted already gained a lot of appreciation from our other colleagues in the UN, other states. For the reason why was that we managed to translate the SDGs into a concrete program of works, which guide us in terms of achieving those goals in a very systematic way. And this is amazing to many developing countries, because those who see the challenges posed by the condition of the economic condition of various developing countries, it sometimes crippled the efforts in achieving those goals. But Indonesia managed to come up with a package of program of action to deliver those SDGs. Back to the question, for Indonesia, the issue of migrant worker, including the UN, is what it is and has always been the number one or the priorities that we have for maybe, I don't know, for decades, and we with Philippines managed to introduce a very important resolution, United Nations General Assembly resolution on the protection of women migrant workers. And it gained the support of numerous countries in the UN. And this effort is to provide the framework of protection and the promotion of the economic condition of women migrant workers in the world, and to enable the countries in the UN to have a framework of cooperation in terms of the protection and promotion of the economy of the women migrant workers. And it actually, the resolution actually reflects or came in tandem or as an implementation of the goals that you mentioned before. Goal number 5, which relates to gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. And goal number 8 in terms of us promoting the sustainable and inclusive economic growth and productive employment and decent work. So these 2 goals of the SDGs really became the 2 important pillars of those resolution and the work forward, the way forward that we are working with all other colleagues in the United Nations. For us, it's important that goal number 8 should be seen as a way to enable a safe environment for the migrant workers, and particularly the women migrant workers, in terms for them to have decent work and a sustainable and inclusive economic growth and employment. I think we have a large and a wide areas of work that we have to do. And I think what we are doing in the UN is providing the basic framework of cooperation, but it will come down to how the agencies in Indonesia and other countries able to really formulate the cooperation necessary to really make these framework felt to those female women migrant workers in Indonesia and those who are abroad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mas, and also thank you for explaining the VNR itself. So I think the question is that I mean, like the challenge that UN is facing right now in terms of each goals. I mean, can you explain just a little bit what challenge in regard or in terms of COVID-19 outbreak itself? Yeah.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah.
So specifically on COVID-19, I think the most challenging time that we have now, and with COVID-19 and with respect to migrant workers, first is the fact that all governments currently are under immense pressure to really cope with the problems that they're having domestically. They're having fiscal pressure, they're having opinion pressure back, even from the population. They even have the very basic problem of really having all the necessity equipments for their medical personnels. These pressure points against the government, um, making us difficult to really try to promote the issue, which they don't see as something very much important at this time. And at the same time, when they are facing these immense challenges to the health, to the economic situation, we are also seeing the challenge of mobility of the people, the challenge of mobility uh, uh, of the migrant worker moving from one country to another, either coming back home to Indonesia or getting to work abroad, and etc. I think this is also posing a very huge challenge for our migrant workers. And with this situation, I think the most important thing for every member states in the UN is that they still need to have uh, uh, some common grounds that they need to be able to address the situation, so that migrant workers will not be endangered in a way that caused by the spread of the COVID-19. I think this is a very important part of the need for our cooperation and engagement between all components of the society, to be able to provide options for governments so that they can enable themselves to better protect and promote the migrant workers.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Mas Ali, for the explanation. Yeah, I think that's enough for me, from me.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Maisi, for the questions. So we also have another question from Hastriansha. Would you like to ask the question and unmute your microphone?
Yeah, thank you for the time. Hello, Brother Ali. Good to see you again.
You're getting younger.
It has been some time, right, since the last time we met drinking coffee in Jakarta. How are you in New York?
Good, good.
Good.
All's
Everything's
well,
good.
all's well.
Yeah, this is uh, my question is basically a bit of concern about the latest update on the Trump versus China regarding the well, you can say the White House is trying to impose additional tariff on Chinese products with the base of um, questioning the COVID-19 source from Wuhan. And they're trying to strip China of its sovereign immunity and cracking down Huawei, the telecommunication companies. I mean, like, this is a trade war that's been going on, and Trump seems to make its way to pressure and take this opportunity, probably for his political purposes, or um, maybe even higher. Like uh, in the 1st of May, the U.S. sent 2 bombers to the South China Sea. And in your regards, as the permanent mission from the United Nations, uh, how do you see Indonesia's position in regards to this? We're in some sort of a middle position, because US versus China, Indonesia and China have been have engaging in a lot of trade and economic um, cooperations. How do you see this will affect Indonesia? Should there be any? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Mas Ali, you can answer the questions directly.
Thank you, Pak Astriansa. Always a difficult question coming from you. Well, this will be a personal response coming from me on this aspect, because I'm not really doing this work very much in daily work that I do in New York. But of course, the general values that we hold always, particularly when we see friction in terms of the issue, particularly when we are in a dire need of having all the solution for the condition, for the situation in our countries. The basic values that we hold dear always: first, that there is always time to evaluate. There is always time to readjust the policies concerning the what you call it, the first instance of the case itself. There's always a time for that, for evaluation, and it's a must. Uh, for instance, Trump's comments on WHO, I think WHO is also is a body that should always be under our evaluation, and the time to do that, however, it's not now. It comes, and then it comes to our second basic value in terms of seeing how the issue should be handled. For us, the time now is for cooperation. The time now is for coordination and to join hand in terms of addressing the challenge, the threat of the virus, of the pandemic, and putting aside all those early grievances to one single country. I think will be necessary for everyone in the world, for the countries, not only the US and China, but also for Indonesia and others, so that we will not gain, or so that we won't lose momentum in terms of our cooperation in handling the pandemic. Bilaterally, Indonesia managed to have a series of joint cooperation in terms of the production of the PPEs with Japan and South Korea. We are also working with WHO in terms of providing the testing in terms of when it comes to a time when we need the testing for the vaccine. We are also Indonesia, along with 5 other countries here in New York, in the UN, we managed to came out with a resolution in the General Assembly to promote those 2 values, that the time now is for cooperation, and we need to put aside our grievances at this time being. But of course, like you just rightly pointed out, it's not enough, because the pressure, the tension, it's still there, and how we are addressing it as a country, I think we even up to President Jokowi even managed to have a direct conversation with President Trump, and back in DC, our embassy also have those conversations with the State Department in DC. But here in New York, as we are embarking also in the Security Council, we talk in length with our colleagues, both with China and in the US, to promote that understanding that we need to create ways and prevent anything that could jeopardize the momentum of cooperation, while you know that we are now embarking on, I think we have 200 laboratories who are now doing the preparation for the vaccine. We are now creating the supply chains for the PPEs, so that all countries will not be having difficulties to provide all the necessary equipments for hospitals. And I think those measures are a good momentum, and it shouldn't be and then disgraced by unnecessary conflict or tension by some countries or some member states of the United Nations.
Okay, Pak Hastriansyah, do you have any follow-up comment or questions?
That's a very diplomatic answer from a diplomat.
Diplomatic answer later on, Pak Hasyansa.
Okay. So we'll be looking forward to meeting you in Jakarta and having the undiplomatic answers.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Stay safe, yeah. Stay
You too.
safe.
You
Stay
too.
healthy. Yeah.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Jeffy. He's from batch
Yeah.
6, a classmate,
Yeah.
please.
Yes, thank you, Yulita. Thank you, Mas Ali, for your mesmerizing insight. So basically, you have been working as a diplomat in New York since 2017, right? And your educational background before, you had international relations. So I would like to ask regarding your educational background and your job right now, because actually I would like to introduce myself. My name is Jeff, and I graduated from University of Indonesia, majoring metallurgical and materials engineering. And right now I'm taking this scholarship from SGPP, Government of Public Policy. So basically, I have a lot of friends in Kemlu actually, and when I ask them about is there any vacant position for me, so is there any possibility for me to join with Kemlu? Actually, they have some kind of the requirement actually for the master degree, because right now I'm already 34, right? 34 years right now. So it's quite difficult for me to enter Kemlu, and the requirement is quite strict for the master degree. If I'm not mistaken, the age must be 30, 31 or 30 to something like that. So basically, how you enter the Kemlu? I mean, as a pro hire or uh, what? Because like you said before, you have been working in Kemlu since 2017. That is my first question, Mas Ali. And my another question would be, what advice would you give to someone just starting out in your field? I mean, yeah, for someone new. And the next question is, what skill have you found most useful in your professional life? Right now, you are you have been working as a diplomat, right? So, do you have any advice on how the student can cultivate this kind of skill? For the example, right now, I graduated from engineering background and then continuing to SGPP. So, do you have any advice how the student like me can cultivate this kind of skill to improve my skill? And the next question is, what are the current or upcoming challenges in the field of diplomacy that you face right now? Maybe my question would be, what is the biggest challenge you ever have in your life during 2017 until now? So if it has been 3 years, right? So what is the biggest challenge of being a diplomat? Okay, thank you, Mas Ali, and thank you, Yulita.
Thank you for the question, Jeff. So if I can summarize, so there are 4 questions. The first one
Yes,
is for people who are more than 32 years old, how can they join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat?
yes,
And then
yes,
what advice
absolutely.
would you like to give someone starting out in your field, as Ali?
Hmm.
And what skill
Yeah,
you have
and then
found most useful, and how to
uh,
cultivate the skill, and what are the challenges that you face in the
yes,
field of diplomacy.
uh, Yulita. Actually, the question number one is there any possibility for me, uh, for somebody like me, uh, uh, who have the age of 34 years old right now? Is there any possibility for me to enter Kemlu? Because I think it's quite difficult. So I just wondering, my Mas Ali has been working for Kemlu since 2017. So it means that uh, when Mas Ali already 30 something, and then he could enter Kemlu. So how was it? How was it? I mean, like, how you get the the opportunity? Yeah, all this kind of thing. Yulita, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Bali, would you like to answer the question?
I will try to answer the questions. And if I forgot something or missed something, please remind me, Yulita.
Yes, sure. Yes.
First on the first question. Actually, 2017 is the first year that I was posted in New York, but I joined the foreign ministry back in 2005 after graduating from the university in 2004. Uh, with regards to the requirements, I may need to see the website first, and I think I can later on share the link to Yulita after this. The second question regarding the advice, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, advice to someone
Yes, at all.
who are starting the work in Kamlu. Uh, like I said maybe before, the first thing you need to understand, uh, there will always be a time when you are challenged with something new in your line of work, in the things that you are handling, in the issues that you are working with on a daily basis. I shared before, when I first joined the ministry, with my background in international relations, I have to work with the APEC desk, which mainly work on the issue of trade and investment. So this was something new for me, and the thing that I learned from that moment up until now, one of is also I can try to answer the other questions that you pose with regard to the skill or the traits of a diplomat. I think the best skill or the trait that you need to have first is never ever satisfied with what you have in terms of your knowledge. That's first, of course. Always never be satisfied with that, including in terms of your language ability, the proficiency of your English or other languages that you have. You should never be satisfied with what you have. That's the first thing that you need to keep in mind with yourself. Secondly, always be ready to adapt to changes. So a good diplomat is someone who is adaptive to the challenges in your line of work, in terms of your working environment within the ministry or within the mission that you are posted to, or in the environment where you are working with, say, in the UN or any other international bodies, or in countries where you never expect to be working in such environment. I had an opportunity to be posted first in Egypt, in Cairo, and I never thought that I would be dealing with managing the arrival of planes to evacuate 2,500 people from Egypt at that time. So those things are something that you never thought of will be happening to you. You know, when you're studying, when you study international relations, you study about international politics, you study of diplomacy, you study of negotiation, but you never study about evacuating your citizens from a foreign country. So those things dictates that you need to have that adaptive ability in terms of the line of work. Other question, the challenges in diplomacy. I think the main challenge in diplomacy always with regards to the changes, the ever-changing environment of the international relations of the world, even and particularly during this pandemic situation, requires you to innovate, requires diplomats to again adjust to the situation. Say in New York, since March 20th this year, the city of New York is being locked down since March 20th. And since the UN headquarters is located in New York City, then it also has to be closed from operation. That means all the meetings, all the negotiations that usually happens in the UN headquarters, inside the building, inside the meeting rooms, should not be happening in that building, and everyone should not be meeting in person. So that poses a very huge challenge in determining a way, an avenue where everybody can negotiate, can meet virtually, but with security requirements that should be in place as well. So these are challenges, some of the challenges that always face us, the ever changing environment of the world. Another question, I think, did I manage to answer everything?
Jeff, do you have any follow-up? Does that answer all of your questions?
Yeah. Yulita, but actually, regarding to the second question is about um, what what kind of skill have you found the most useful in your professional life? I mean, like how you can give an advice on how the student like me who has a engineering background can cultivate this kind of skill. I mean, like maybe for you who has the previous background in international relationship is more related to Kemlu, right? But sometimes it's really hard for me who has an engineering background and who wants to enter a Kemlu. So what do you think of it? I mean, like, could you give me some advice regarding that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I get the question. I think I have a couple of friends, even in my batch in the foreign ministry, which their bachelor degree was from science. One is from MIPA, Fakultas MIPA. The other one is from engineering, but not from UI, from other university. They managed to have so the first one from the one from MIPA from my batch. At that time, we don't have that requirements that only social students studies that can be accepted. At that time, she can join Kamlu with her background from MIPA. The other one, my other colleague from engineering from other university, he enrolled in Kamlu with his master's degree in social studies. What I found from them, because well, back in the university, we always have this, jokes about our about the program that we have, international relations. Uh, some some of my friends told me, well, as long as you read newspapers, you can succeed in your studies in international relations. As long as you read, as long as this and that, you can be successful. I think to some degree, it has some points. It has some merit points, not only for, not only for Kamlu or international relations, but also for other career as well. But for Kamlu, where the things that you hold dear is information and knowledge, those things might come first. So the best traits, the important traits that the diplomat must have is that thirst of knowledge, your desire to have more knowledge, not only in your academic background, in other background that you need, you deem necessary. I mentioned about when I had the chance to join the Kamlu first on to study trade and investment. I did a lot of workshop. To be honest, I joined a workshop from the WTO from Geneva, and also from the Ministry of Trade, Pak Wisnu. I joined their courses on international negotiation and the WTO and others. And I also had an opportunity to work on issues pertaining to counterterrorism as well as corruption. I don't have my education background in law. I studied a little bit of law, but not much. But when I need to deal with those issues, corruption issues, with the counterterrorism issues, I have to equip myself with the knowledge, the basic knowledge, the necessary understanding of the legal framework where you deal with those kind of issues. And I do manage to push myself to get on some courses with regards to law and anti-corruption, etc. And I think that is a necessity for us working in this kind of work. And to those also, in particularly who are studying in SGPP on public policy, well, I mentioned before about tuna industry. I think that's something new for me as well, but it provides me with a solid framework of thinking when you are dealing with your partner in bilateral negotiation, when you're doing negotiations in terms of trade, in terms of processing food processing, for instance. You will understand exactly what it means to get a hold of your value chains from the very beginning of the value chain until the end, and the processing of your products. And those kind of information were never been taught in international relations classes. You got it from yourself or from your experience, or you push yourself to get those knowledge outside of your cubicles of work and outside of your campus. I think that notion is very important. No particular, I think, no particular skills, I think, that very necessary. If you talk about negotiation, of course, you need to have that certain skills of adapting yourself with the environment. But it goes without saying, when you are working in the environment, you get to know the people you're working with, you get to know the environment, you get to be able to be excelled in that kind of work eventually. But the most important thing, again, I think we should always be broaden our knowledge in terms of the social studies, the policies of our countries. I think this is very important.
Okay, Jeff, do you have any follow up on that, or does that answer your question?
No, all is clear. Thank you, Yulita. Thank you, Mas Ali.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question from Ms. Ratu. Yes, Ms. Ratu, would you like to ask the question and unmute your microphone? Hello, Ms. Ratu. Oh, but we also have some questions on YouTube and also on the chat. So I would like to read the one on the chat first. It's about the, oh yeah, Ms. Ratu is here. Okay, thank you. Would you like to ask the question, please?
Okay, hello Mas Ali, Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Yeah, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, yeah, for explaining us about anything related to diplomat and diplomacy. With your explanation, I become know about that. Yeah, actually, I was invited by Miss Yulita, and then I didn't have any idea what is it about the first, but now I get it. Yeah, the point. I think, yeah, my question should be the first question, yeah, because it is very basic questions, yeah, since I didn't involve, yeah, with something called diplomat or anything else, except something like learning, education, or dealing with my student or client or my tutor. So I think I need to ask about this. Okay, okay. Since that I know you are a diplomat, yeah, for the first time, yeah, how, yeah, how you adapt with the responsibility of diplomat duty, yeah, since I think that task is not easy, yeah, it's not easy, yeah. And then the second, for those kind of duties of diplomat, something like representing, promoting, protecting, negotiating, and reporting, yeah, about our country, I think it is very important duties and high level of qualified jobs, I think, yeah. And then for five kinds of jobs, yeah, you know, I'm interested in protecting our country. Yeah, how the diplomat, you know, protect their country when their duty as diplomat. Yeah, that's my question. Second, and then the third is about uh, you know, Indonesian has got populations, yeah, a very big population of Muslim, and then we need to build a good relationship, a good life of religion here, yeah, atmosphere of religion here, and then I wanna ask, yeah, is there any help or any assistance or any aid from the cooperation between Indonesia and America regarding how to build the good life for religion in Indonesia. I think that's my question, Mas Ali. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Ratu. So, Pak Ali, would you like to answer the questions directly?
And if I miss some question, please remind me,
Okay.
Lita. First, the first question: how do I embark on my work as a diplomat? Something like that. How you adapt with the work.
Yeah.
Uh, I think one important thing that you have to have in mind, well, is that you it is important you have a passion. That's first. You have to have that passion to work in this kind of field. uh, it's sometimes it can be seen as luxurious in a way you are traveling abroad and everything, but with that comes price. You know, you have to leave your family, you have to go abroad often, and maybe once or twice it's interesting and it's fascinating to go to trip like that,
Yeah.
but afterwards you miss your house, you miss your home, you miss your
Yeah.
family, you miss bakso, you miss and everything.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you have also to bear in mind. That's why I think from my experience, you need to have that passion first. You need to
Okay.
have that passion to work in that kind of environment. Secondly, on you know a lot about our line of work, the
No,
protecting.
I find out.
Amazing.
I should ask Miss Yulita actually.
That's true, and thank you very much for reminding me. And in terms of protecting, well, there's a lot of ways in doing it. Uh, my this is a personal, maybe personal story again. My grandfather was an army officer in
Okay, the
Indonesia. My
same.
grandfather,
The same goes here.
and his children, no one. He has my mom. She had I think 8 sisters and brothers, and none of them joined the military.
The same. Me here 6, and no one joined army because father always far away.
We have the same experience,
Yeah,
and
chemistry.
when my grandfather found out that I joined the foreign ministry, he said like this: "Oh, finally somebody joined my step to protect this country." He said like that. So
Okay.
I was very very amused to that.
Yeah.
But I think in a way that try to put into perspective how diplomat works in protecting the country. We don't do what our grandfathers do or our military colleagues are doing. We don't have that ability, but we are doing it through the negotiations that we are doing, through relationships that we are building, through cooperation that we are maintaining. I think those are the ways that we are doing the protection of our country. And uh, I didn't get your third question on Muslim population, good relations uh, between religious groups. You mean?
No, I think is there any aid or assistance or help from America to Indonesia that regarding building the life of religion in Indonesia, yeah, because Indonesia very not only one religion, yeah, something like that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of bilateral, I mean government to government cooperation, the the bilateral, I don't have the details, but I believe we have that cooperation in terms of uh, religious freedom, religious interreligious dialogue, and so on and so forth. But in terms of concrete cooperation or assistance, I think with the U.S. has a lot of Muslim population. It has numerous Muslim affiliated organizations or other religious organizations, which are also working very much with a lot of countries in the world with their counterparts. And I think one or two or some of them are also working directly in the field in Indonesia with maybe the NU, the Muhammadiyah, or things like that. I don't know the specifics, but I believe if we try to find out, we should have that kind of arrangement with those organizations in the US.
Okay. Okay, Mas Ali, thank you very much. Yeah, I didn't imagine before that we have the same situation coming from army family, and then no one got something like joint family army, and then okay, that's okay. Okay, that's all. Thank you for explanations. Nice to hear that. Thank you, Miss Yulta.
Thank you, Miss Tatu. So for the next question, we have the questions from the YouTube and as well as from the chat section. Um, so relate the one from the chat session was related to the Security Council membership. So the question is from Nur Moon. So her question was what are your view on the expansion of Security Council membership? You know how we can push for expanding it and if it will be good for the world or not.
Thank you. It's a very important question. I think this is a very crucial issue that is still being discussed up until now in the UN. We have a number of platforms in terms of discussing the membership of the Security Council, the enlargement of the membership of the Security Council. And for Indonesia, our view is that the Security Council, the United Nations, needs to be able to really adapt with the current change in the world in terms of the development of the states, the countries, the geopolitics of the world, which is now changing every day. The landscape is changing, and the Security Council should also be adapting to that changes. And while we are trying to really put that into practice, there are some maybe challenges that member states of the UN needs to really handle first. One of those are that we in terms of the aspiration, we maybe most of the countries in the UN in the world, we have the same view on that, the needs for that expansion, that enlargement of the membership. But in terms of the details, this is the one thing that we need to come to sit down together to settle this thoroughly. Say there are countries that are saying maybe Africa, the African region, with their the number of the countries there, a huge number of countries in Africa, they should have maybe a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 members, permanent members in the council. And the other way around, the Asian countries saying, well, we need to have 2 maybe from Asia. Those perspectives, those viewpoints are still under construction, if you may say so, in the UN. And I think it's not going to be a very short process, but it's a discussion that's underway currently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Um, and then there is another question from the YouTube. It's related to the one that you mentioned earlier regarding how the diplomats actually their the foreign policy is based on the domestic policy that was being formulated inside the country. So the question is from Ardi from page 6. Well, what is the nexus between public policy you learn, which is domestic focus, with your roles as diplomats, and the foreign ministries interact with the outside party are important, but at the end of the day, the domestic institution enact the policies, right?
I get the second question. The first question, what was it?
The first question is, what is the nexus between public policy you learn, which is domestic focus, with your roles as a diplomat? Because at SGPP we will learn about public policy and the policy formulations and all. Um, but how does this what we learn correlate with your roles as a diplomat? And then um, the second question is like the foreign ministries interact with the outside parties are important, the interaction are important, but at the end of the day the domestic institution enact the policies. So what is your
I think
comment on that?
I'm going to comment both of the questions together because it relates one and another. The first, my first comment would be regarding the nexus between public policy and foreign policy, or my line of work. I explained in the beginning that my decision to take SGPP and public policy as my master's degree course is the fact that what I learned from my line of work, there's a intermastic characteristic of the work that I do. Intermastic, international and domestic, you can say it like that. It's a phrase that also was introduced by Hassan Wirayuda at that time. So you cannot really separate between your line of work, the diplomacy, the foreign policy, with the policy of the country where you live in, with the public policy that you are embracing yourself inside that country. And foreign policy is driven by that public policy within that state you are living. I have one small example. We have this new new cooperation, new partnership in the multilateral setting in the UN, which with the terms of health and foreign policy, global health and foreign policy. So first thing, you have this cluster issue of health, and the other one is foreign policy. Health, and when we talk about health domestically, it relates directly with the public policy issues that we are learning in our school in SGPP. And now in the UN, and Indonesia is one of the leaders of this group, we have this global health and foreign policy mechanism, which feel the very strong linkages between foreign policy and the health issues in the world. And this kind of issue, interlinkages, is becoming more prominent when we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. You have this immense need to have this cooperation, partnership in terms of tackling the issue of COVID-19. When you are embarking yourself in diplomacy, in foreign policy, you will always mirror what you're doing outside, mirror what you're doing bilaterally, regionally, and internationally, mirror that what you're doing with the aspiration, with the priorities back home. Say, for instance, one of the priorities of this current government, as well as Kemlu, the foreign ministry, is economic diplomacy. It relates directly with one of the main priorities of President Jokowi. So when you are saying, when the president is saying, we need to develop Indonesia, we need to develop our provinces, we need to develop our ports, then what diplomacy must do is to echo that sentiment and to translate it into a foreign policy which will gear all the resources from abroad to Indonesia to help the development and the execution of those priorities by the government of Indonesia. So that's, I hope I can explain how I see the nexus of foreign policy and public policy. And it also relates very much with your second question, when you say that, again, at the end of the day, you need to really base your efforts, your actions on the things that are going on domestically, on the policies inside your country, on the things transpire from the government in Indonesia, for example, as we are Indonesian diplomats. That's very, very true, because like I said before, you can never decouple between public policy and foreign policy, because both of them are working in tandem. One is strengthening the other. So when you talk about how you base yourself, you found yourself a very huge or strong standing in your domestic politics, in your domestic policy. It is the first spot when you want to embark on your foreign policy abroad.
All right. Thank you for the insight. That was very interesting. And we have several questions. Let me check the time. Okay, we still have about 23 minutes. We have another question on the chat. This is from Pak Yudi from Patch 6. He asked questions about why why not become an army like your grandfather? That's the first question. And then the second question is how far or what percent is that SGPP knowledge can be used on your work so far? So that's the questions.
First question, maybe I'm not tall enough. I'm not tall enough to be a good military officer. Kidding, but that's true. But I think I have this passion since high school to uh, uh, to learn more about social studies. So in high school, I don't like math, so I enroll in EPS studies in high school, and I found out there's I think one program on I don't remember what, but it teaches it taught me about United Nations. It taught me about international relations and stuff. I think from that on, I got interested with this study, and of course I don't do good in math. Secondly, the percentage SGPP
Yes.
knowledge can be used in my line of work. I don't know how much, but it I mean, in SGPP, in public policy studies, we are taught to master the ability of assessing a policy of a country, of a government. We are also taught on how best to formulate a policy, the steps that we need to do to make we need to make in terms of arriving at a good policy, and we are also taught about implementing that policy, the best way of implementing those policies. I think for me, those are the important part of the study that I always have in my mind, and which also guide me in my line of work. say, for example, when you are negotiating something in the UN, and the issue that you are having on the table is something that you are not familiar with. Say, for example, water, water access, for example, the issue of water access and sanitation. I don't know that kind of issue. First thing, of course, I need to learn how Indonesia perceives that issue and what Indonesia wants from that kind of issue. Secondly, I need to understand also what other countries' position or perception on that issue. With that, I can navigate the discussion, the negotiations easily. I mean, I will be able to make the most important points that maybe Indonesia are really up to doing or having, and also providing those negotiated points with my counterparts when I know that, or what they want is A, B, C, D, E. I think those knowledge, those basic frame of thinking that we learn from SGPP is something that always be useful in my line of work.
Okay, we have another questions from Dia. So Dia, would you like to ask your question directly? You may unmute your.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, my name is Dia. I am a student from batch 6. I would like to know about your story in detail on the issues that you brought into UN that you mentioned briefly before. It was human rights, the colonization, and you also touched terrorism, right? So I would like to know in detail story and why it's matter. And the second question is in this pandemic season, and also Ramadan in the US, how you and your family cope with the situation in the US. Thank you.
Yes, Fali, you may answer the question. I actually have the same question with Dia regarding the Ramadan in New York right now.
What was the second question?
The second question is, how is the Ramadan during the COVID-19 in New York?
Second question. Okay. So the first one on the issues. Well, this is, I think we need one special session for this question, for first question. To keep it short, in the UN headquarters in New York, the UN organization is divided into number of bodies, or what you call it, what we call here committees in the UN, in General Assembly. We have 6 main committees in the UN and here in New York. The third committee deals with human rights, as well as human rights, social and political rights. Fourth committee, which I also deal with, one of the issues that are dealt with the committee, the fourth committee, is on decolonization. Why is it important for us to be dealing with these issues? The first, of course, for Indonesia, particularly since the reform in back in 98, 99, particularly when we had that our constitution change, our constitutional changes back then, we as Indonesians, we are determined not to have the same mistake that we had before in terms of our ability to protect the rights of the population in Indonesia. And since then on, we have been committed to protect and to promote the human rights of our people and the people of the world. And that's what we are doing in the third committee. We are promoting and protecting the interests of Indonesians in terms of respecting and protecting the human rights of all population. With decolonization, with my issue on decolonization, it is important because we are the founder of the KAA, the Asia Pacific Conference, back in 1955, where we declare ourselves that we need to get rid of colonization everywhere. We need to provide independence to all our brothers and sisters in the world who are colonized by the West at the time. And up until now, there are still a couple of territories that are still considered to be under the issue of colonization, and we are striving to get through that issue in that committee. And on counterterrorism, I'm not doing it here in New York, but I did that back in when I was still in Kemlu in Pejambon. But of course, when you talk about counterterrorism, the first basic tenets that you need to keep in mind is that you are obliged to provide protection to all of our Indonesian population from those threat of terrorism. And in the same time, you also have that obligation as a state to provide a better communication and guidance to the population in terms of how to promote understanding of those challenging issues that we are facing. And this is not a very easy job to do, but we are, I think, quite successful in that matter up until now. And with regards to Ramadan in the US, well, it is 15 hours of fasting. The good thing about New York, particularly New York City is a city of numerous nations. So it's a immigrant nation, immigrant city. Even one of my kids is learning in the public school here in New York, and when we first arrived, they even assist us in providing a teacher who speaks bahasa Indonesia, because it's easy to find those people who talk languages, multi-languages here in New York City. Those people coming from Asia, Africa, whatever you name it. And because of that, Islam is also thriving here in New York City. It's easy to find mosques, it's easy to find halal food, it's easy to find restaurants, Islamic, Muslim restaurants with halal food. And because of that, during normal times, me and my family, we used to go outside after Tarawih, after the masjid prayers. We used to go for a trip to those restaurants, sometimes visiting various mosques here in New York, various Islamic communities, aside from Indonesian Islamic communities. But during this pandemic, those are closed. We don't have that opportunity anymore. The mosque, same like Indonesia, maybe in Jakarta and other areas surrounding Jakarta, mosque churches are not operating. It's closed. But the services of pengajian, all those services are conducted online now every week, and maybe a couple of times a week. We have this virtual sermon by the imam in masjid through Zoom like this. And also Iqra studies for the kids to learn Quran via Zoom. It's also available here in New York from the masjid. But of course, it's not the same with the usual practice when you go to the masjid, when you go to is the Muslim communities to Tarawih Jama'ah and go around to the places. But at least the people here, we have this strong bond between communities, and we have take care of each other's. Whenever we have community members are sick, we try to do our best to keep the family safe.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting. And this is my also my question related to the story of a diplomat who live in different part of the world. So, is there any untold life story as a diplomat that we as a general public cannot read in blogs or cannot read in newspaper, but you experience that?
Yeah. We I think it's important to have a lot of avenues in your disposal. I mean, we might have the difficulties in having one, but there's always a chance to have the other instances of, say, online sources or anything else. And we should always be open to all those options.
Oh, okay. And as it we have 9 minutes. Let me check on the if there is any more question from the attendees. But okay, there's no more questions here. So this is last but not least. Do you have any last statement or message for the current students or the prospective students of SGPP who are hopefully will be the future policymakers of Indonesia?
Hmm. Well, don't take it seriously when you study in SGPP in the sense that you have friends there in the class that you have to maybe take some moment together, some coffee in some places in Sentul or some other places, doing some gatherings together. Uh, and at the same time, of course, make use of all the very excellent lecturers from SGPP. And I know for sure I gain a lot from them. And to be able to talk directly with them in classes or after classes is a very resourceful experience for everyone, for even for me. And I thank SGPP and their faculty members for that. And thank you for this opportunity again.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just curious, like in batch 6, we usually take our lunch in Bumamas. Uh, is there also available in your batch?
Which one is that?
Bumamas is the one we have to go a bit up near the what was that? Like there is that road and then we just go up there. I'm not sure if it's available
Like a
in 2016. Yes, like the one that we
it's
use.
like a shack.
Yeah.
Traditional building, like a shack
Yes, yes,
with a
yes,
view, something like that. We
yes.
go there. We went there as well.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually where we have a coffee and break before the class and as well as for lunch.
That's important.
Yes, that's very important. Sometimes we also go to for in the UN, but we have to go a bit far for that. So yeah. Okay. Hopefully we can see you as well in campus after this coronavirus end. Because it will be very great for us to have you maybe in another session, and because there are a lot of many things that we want to discuss regarding the UN, regarding the Security Councils and all. So with that last statement, we have to come to the end of today's alumni talk. And these are some takeaways that I note, advice from Bali that has been given earlier. The first one is never satisfied with the knowledge that you have. And the second one is be adaptive to challenges, because life is a never-ending learning process. And if the audience you want to learn about public policy, don't miss the opportunity to be enrolled at the School of Government and Public Policy Indonesia, because we are open for admission for the new academic year. And I would like to thank Pak Ali for taking your time to discuss your inspiring journey after SGPP, and then the lesson that you learned, that you have shared with us. Thank you very much. And hopefully we can see our future filled with hopes and promises, especially after this pandemic. And okay, and for the audience, I would like. Yeah. And I would like to thank the audience for attending the sessions. And don't forget that today we have another webinar at 2 p.m. with Professor Peter Verheesen from the professor of Antwerp University to discuss about the future data in 2050. So please don't miss that. Stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you very much, Mas Ali.